For most of my life, I knew exactly how to impress everyone around me, until one quiet moment forced me to ask a question and I realized I had no answer. The first time I realized I could earn love, it came with a gold star sticker and my mother's smile. I was 6 years old, standing in our kitchen with a spelling test clutched in my hands. 100%. Every word right. I remember how the paper trembled because my fingers were sweaty. I had practiced those words for hours at the dining room table while other kids were outside riding bikes. I had whispered them to myself in bed before falling asleep. I wanted that score. Not because I loved spelling. Because I wanted the look on her face. When I handed her the paper, she bent down and said she was proud of me. She pressed the gold star with her thumb like it meant something sacred. My chest felt warm and full, bigger than my small body could hold. That moment stayed with me. It was not just the praise. It was the relief. Relief that I had done it right. Relief that I had not disappointed her. Relief that I was good. After that, I started chasing that feeling. My father was not a man of many compliments. He worked long hours at a manufacturing plant and came home tired, smelling like metal and sweat. When he did notice me, it was usually to correct something. Sit up straight. Speak clearly. Do not embarrass yourself. But every now and then, if I did something right, he would nod. Just a small nod. Once, when I cleaned the garage without being asked, he clapped my shoulder and said, "That is how a responsible young man acts." I replayed that sentence in my head for days. Responsible. That became my identity before I even understood what identity meant. In third grade, I volunteered to collect homework because my teacher said she appreciated students who took initiative. In fifth grade, I stayed after school to help stack chairs because the principal once told me I was dependable. In middle school, I let a louder kid take credit for a group project because he needed it more than I did. At least that is what I told myself. If someone looked pleased, I felt secure. If someone frowned, I felt hollow. I started studying people the way other kids studied sports stats. I watched their reactions, learned what made them smile, adjusted my behavior accordingly. By the time I reached high school, I had built a version of myself that fit neatly into every room. Teachers loved me. Coaches trusted me. Friends described me as easygoing. I thought that meant I was doing life correctly. There is one memory that still stands out. I was 14. I wanted to try out for art club. I liked drawing late at night when no one was around. It made me feel calm in a way nothing else did. But when I mentioned it at dinner, my father looked confused. "Art," he said, "that is more of a hobby. You should focus on something practical. Maybe debate team. That looks good on college applications." My mother nodded. Debate would be impressive. Impressive. That word mattered more than enjoyment. So I joined debate team. I told myself it was fine. It would help me later. It would make them proud. And when I won my first local competition, my parents invited relatives over to celebrate. They talked about my future like it was already mapped out. Standing there, listening to them describe me, I felt something strange. They were proud. Everyone was impressed. I was being praised. And yet, I felt slightly detached. Like I was watching a version of myself being admired from across the room. But I ignored that feeling. It seemed ungrateful to question something that was clearly working. Approval was currency, and I had just learned how to earn it. I did not realize at the time that every small adjustment, every swallowed preference, every quiet yes when I meant no, was building something. Not confidence, not character, a mask. And I would wear it so long that, eventually, I would forget what my own face looked like underneath. I did not know that yet. All I knew was that the gold star felt good, and I wanted another one. By the time I reached college, I was known as the easy one. That was what my friends called me. The dependable guy. The one who never made things complicated. If plans changed, I adapted. If someone needed notes from class, I shared them. If there was tension in the group, I stepped in to smooth it over. I thought that was maturity. Freshman year, I had wanted to study literature. I loved books, not just reading them, but sitting with them, breaking them apart, feeling the way certain sentences lingered in my chest long after I closed the cover. But when I told my academic advisor, he suggested business instead, said it would open more doors, said it would impress future employers. When I called home to talk it through, my father did not hesitate. "Business is smart," he said. "You can always read books on your own time." So I switched majors. Everyone approved. Professors praised my work ethic. My parents told relatives I was making responsible decisions. Even my friends said I was practical. Inside, though, something small went quiet. I started noticing how often I scanned rooms before speaking, how I weighed my opinions against what would land well. If someone told a joke I did not find funny, I laughed anyway. If a girlfriend suggested a restaurant I did not like, I said it sounded great. I dated a girl named Claire during my sophomore year. She was opinionated, decisive, the kind of person who filled space without asking permission. I admired that about her. It felt bold. Once, we argued about where to move after graduation. She wanted the city. I wanted something slower, closer to home. I remember the tightness in my chest as I prepared to say what I actually felt. But when she said, "The city just makes more sense," I nodded. "You are right," I told her. She smiled, satisfied. Later that night, lying awake in the dark, I realized I had not even tried to explain myself. I had skipped straight to agreement. Not because I was convinced. Because I was afraid of being the obstacle. The disappointment. The difficult one. That pattern followed me everywhere. Group projects. Jobs. Relationships. I worked harder than anyone else, not just to succeed, but to avoid criticism. If my boss hinted at staying late, I stayed later. If coworkers needed coverage, I volunteered. I became the responsible one, the reliable one, the safe choice. People trusted me. People praised me. But sometimes, walking home alone, I felt strangely disconnected from the decisions shaping my life. It was like I was living a script written by applause, and I had no idea what I would say if the clapping stopped. By my late 20s, I had built a reputation I could not escape. At work, I was the one managers relied on. I joined a mid-sized consulting firm straight out of college, and within 2 years, I was handling clients that should have gone to people older than me. I did not complain about the workload. I welcomed it. Long hours meant visible effort. Visible effort meant approval. When my supervisor once said, "I do not know what we would do without you," I carried that sentence around like a trophy. I started arriving before sunrise and leaving long after the cleaning crew came through. If someone made a mistake, I covered for them. If a deadline slipped, I fixed it quietly. Promotions came steadily. So did compliments. From the outside, it looked like success. My parents bragged about me at church. My mother told people I had always been driven. My father introduced me as his son, the consultant, with a hint of pride in his voice that I had chased my whole childhood. But something strange happened the higher I climbed. The more people trusted me, the less I questioned what I actually wanted. I bought a condo because it seemed like the logical next step. Everyone said it was smart. I started dating a woman named Megan because she was kind, stable, and my friends approved. She told me she loved how steady I was, how I never caused drama. "You are so easy to be with," she once said, smiling. Easy. That word followed me everywhere. One night, Megan asked where I saw myself in 5 years. I answered automatically. Senior partner track. Bigger place. Maybe kids. She seemed pleased. But later, brushing my teeth and staring at my reflection, I realized something uncomfortable. I had listed goals that sounded respectable, solid, impressive, but I had not once asked myself if they felt right. At work, a new project came up that required relocating across the country for at least a year. I did not want to go. I felt it immediately, a quiet resistance in my chest. Still, when my boss said, "You are the perfect fit," I nodded. "Of course," I replied. Everyone congratulated me, called it a huge opportunity. That night, sitting alone in my condo surrounded by boxes, I felt a dull ache I could not name. I had earned their approval again. So why did it feel like I was leaving something behind? And what exactly was I walking toward? Moving across the country felt impressive on paper. New city, bigger clients, higher stakes. Everyone said I was brave, ambitious, strategic. My parents called relatives the week I landed. Megan told her friends she was proud of me. Even my boss shook my hand like I had just won something. But when the plane touched down and I stepped into that unfamiliar airport, all I felt was pressure. The new office was sharper, louder, more competitive. People talked in quick, polished sentences. Every meeting felt like a performance. I learned quickly that approval here was harder to earn, but once you had it, it meant more. So I worked even harder. I volunteered for the most complicated accounts. I memorized clients' preferences. I anticipated problems before they surfaced. When my team lead criticized a presentation, I rewrote the entire thing overnight without being asked. He started calling me rock solid. I absorbed that label like oxygen. At the same time, Megan and I were growing distant. Long calls turned into short check-ins. When she hinted that the distance felt heavy, I reassured her with calm, logical explanations. It was temporary. It was for our future. This was the smart move. She eventually said she was not sure we wanted the same things. Instead of asking what she meant, instead of telling her I had not been sure either, I said I understood. We ended things politely. Friends told me I handled it maturely. No drama. No anger. But after hanging up that final call, I sat on the floor of my apartment and felt something crack open. I had just agreed to the end of a relationship without fighting for it. Because fighting would have meant discomfort, disagreement, possibly disappointing her. The project at work reached its peak around the same time. A high-profile client. Intense scrutiny. Long nights under fluorescent lights that hummed softly above my desk. When we finally closed the deal, the applause was literal. The team clapped. My boss praised me in front of everyone. "You saved this," he said. The room buzzed with approval. And I smiled. Of course I did. But walking back to my apartment that night, the city loud around me, I felt hollow in a way that scared me. I had done everything right. I had earned every compliment. So why did it feel like I was disappearing? That question followed me into bed. And for the first time in my life, the applause did not drown it out. The defining moment did not arrive with a dramatic explosion. It came quietly, on an ordinary Tuesday morning. I was in a conference room with glass walls, presenting quarterly projections to a group of executives. My slides were polished. My numbers were airtight. I had rehearsed every sentence until it sounded effortless. Halfway through, one of the senior partners interrupted me. He leaned back in his chair and asked a simple question. "What do you think?" Not what does the data show. Not what is the safest recommendation. What do you think? My mind went blank. I stood there, remote in hand, heart pounding in a way that had nothing to do with public speaking. I knew what the projection suggested. I knew what the firm would prefer. I even knew what answer would land well. But I did not know what I thought. There was a long pause. Someone cleared their throat. So I did what I always did. I delivered the answer that would cause the least friction, the one most aligned with the room. Heads nodded. The meeting moved on. I finished the presentation to polite applause. But that question echoed long after I left the building. What do you think? That evening, I skipped my usual routine of staying late. I walked home before sunset, something I had not done in months. The sky was streaked with orange and pink. People were laughing outside restaurants. Life was happening in a way that felt strangely separate from mine. When I reached my apartment, I did not turn on the lights right away. I sat in the dimness and let the silence settle. For years, I had measured myself through reactions. Praise meant I was on track. Criticism meant I needed adjustment. Approval was proof of worth. But without someone reacting, who was I? I tried to remember the last decision I made purely because it felt right to me. Not strategic. Not impressive. Not responsible. I could not find one. The realization was not loud. It was heavy. I had built a life optimized for validation. Every major choice filtered through imagined applause. Every risk calculated to avoid disappointment. And somewhere along the way, I had outsourced my own compass. The frightening part was not that I had lived this way. It was that I did not know how to stop. Sitting there in the dark, I felt the first real discomfort of my life. Not the discomfort of hard work. Not the stress of deadlines. The discomfort of not knowing who I was without someone watching. And for the first time, I did not rush to fix it. After that meeting, something shifted, but not in a dramatic way. It was more like a low hum that would not turn off. What do you think? I started noticing how often I paused before answering even the smallest questions. A coworker asked where we should grab lunch. My instinct was to say, whatever you prefer. I caught myself. My mind raced, scanning for the safest option. Why was choosing a sandwich place suddenly difficult? Because I was no longer sure if I liked anything for its own sake. I began replaying old memories. The art club I never joined. The literature major I abandoned. The city I moved to because it made sense, not because I wanted it. The relationship I let fade because fighting for it might have made me inconvenient. Every memory carried the same thread. I adjusted. I optimized. I pleased. I told myself that was maturity, that it was selflessness. But now it felt more like fear. Fear of being disliked. Fear of being wrong. Fear of standing alone in my own opinion. The discomfort grew stronger one weekend when I visited my parents. We sat around their dining table, the same one where I had once practiced spelling words. My mother asked about work. My father nodded approvingly as I described a new opportunity. I heard pride in their voices. Normally, that pride would have filled me. Instead, I felt tired. My mother said, "You have always made such smart choices." Smart, responsible, dependable. I realized those words described behavior, not desire. Performance, not preference. After dinner, my father pulled me aside. He said he was impressed with how steady I had become. He said he never worried about me. That was meant to be a compliment. But as he spoke, a strange thought crossed my mind. When had anyone ever worried about what I wanted? On the drive back to my apartment, the question sat heavy in my chest. I had spent my entire life avoiding disappointment. But in doing so, I had also avoided exploration, conflict, uncertainty, the messy process of figuring out who I was. The mask I had built was not dramatic. It was polite, functional, praiseworthy. That was what made it dangerous, because no one questioned it. Not my parents, not my bosses, not my partners, and for years, not even me. Now the silence inside my apartment felt different. Less like loneliness, more like space. Uncomfortable space. The kind where something real might finally have room to speak. I just did not know if I was ready to hear it. The real break did not happen at work. It happened on a quiet Sunday morning. I was standing in my kitchen, staring at my calendar. The week ahead was packed. Meetings, strategy calls, a networking dinner I had agreed to attend even though I had no interest in going. I felt that familiar pull. Show up, perform well, earn approval. But instead of reaching for my suit jacket, I found myself sitting down at the table. I asked myself something simple. If no one knew what I chose today, what would I do? The question felt almost dangerous. My first instinct was to dismiss it. That was not how life worked. Choices had consequences. People expected things. But still I sat there. And slowly, something surfaced. I did not want to go to the networking dinner. It was not strategic. It was not beneficial. It was just another room full of polite conversations and exchanged business cards. Another performance. For the first time, I considered not going. Immediately, my chest tightened. I imagined my boss noticing. I imagined someone thinking I lacked ambition. I imagined the subtle shift in how people saw me. Disappointment. The old fear rose quickly, but underneath it was something else. Relief. The idea of staying home, cooking something simple, maybe even pulling out the old sketchbook I had not touched in years, felt calm. Honest. I realized how foreign that calm felt. I picked up my phone. My thumb hovered over the message thread with my boss. My heart pounded harder than it ever had during a presentation. I typed that I would not be able to attend the dinner after all. I kept it brief. Professional. No elaborate excuse. Just a boundary. When I hit send, I felt exposed. Like I had stepped onto a stage without a script. For the next hour, I waited for the fallout. For disappointment. For consequences. The response, when it came, was simple. Understood. That was it. No lecture. No visible disapproval. I sat there staring at the screen, almost confused. The world had not collapsed. No one had revoked their approval. The silence that followed felt different from the heavy silence before. It felt lighter. Uncertain, but lighter. That afternoon, I found my old sketchbook in a box in the closet. The pages were yellowed at the edges. I flipped through drawings I had forgotten I made. When I started sketching again, my lines were shaky at first. Out of practice. Unsure. But as the pencil moved, something in me steadied. There was no applause in my kitchen. No one nodding. No one impressed. And yet, for the first time in years, I felt present. It was small. Almost insignificant from the outside. But inside, it felt like the beginning of something that might finally belong to me. Saying no to that dinner did not transform me overnight. If anything, it made everything louder. Once I broke the pattern in one small way, I started noticing how deeply it ran. At work, I hesitated before volunteering for extra projects. In conversations, I paused before automatically agreeing. And every time I chose differently, discomfort followed. It felt like stepping into cold water. A few weeks later, another opportunity came up. A promotion track that would require even longer hours and constant travel. My manager called me into his office and laid it out clearly. It was a compliment, a vote of confidence. The old version of me would have accepted before he finished speaking. Instead, I asked for time to think. He looked slightly surprised but nodded. That night, I walked through the city without headphones. I let the noise of traffic and conversation wash over me. I kept asking myself one thing. Do I want this? Not, will this impress people? Not, will this secure my reputation? Just, do I want this? The honest answer scared me. No, I did not want a life that revolved entirely around proving myself. I did not want to keep climbing just because it was expected. I did not want to wake up 10 years from now and realize I had optimized every choice for applause. But saying no would shift how people saw me. It might mean I was no longer the golden employee, the obvious pick, the safe bet. That possibility unsettled me more than I expected. For so long, approval had been my anchor. Without it, I felt exposed, undefined. I realized something painful then. If people stopped praising me, I was not sure I would know how to value myself. The thought lingered as I sat alone in my apartment. I imagined a version of my life where I was no longer impressive, where my parents could not brag as easily, where colleagues saw me as average. The fear was real, but beneath it was something steady, a quiet sense that maybe average was not the worst thing. Maybe being seen as normal meant I was finally choosing based on something real. The next morning, I walked into my manager's office and declined the promotion track. He asked if I was certain. My voice wavered slightly, but I said yes. I walked out feeling unsteady. No applause. No congratulations. Just calm. And in that calm, I felt the beginning of a different kind of strength. After I declined the promotion, something subtle changed in how people treated me. Not dramatically. No one confronted me. No doors slammed. But I noticed I was no longer the automatic choice for high-visibility projects. My name came up less often in meetings. Someone else stepped into the role of the reliable one. At first, that stung more than I expected. I would sit in conference rooms and feel the urge to raise my hand, to prove I was still valuable. I had to physically stop myself from volunteering just to reclaim that identity. Without constant reinforcement, my sense of worth felt shaky. One evening, I called my mother. I told her about the promotion I had turned down. There was a pause on the line. "Are you sure that was wise?" she asked gently. There it was. Not anger. Not disappointment. Doubt. I felt 12 years old again, holding that spelling test, waiting for a reaction. For a moment, I almost reversed course in my mind. I imagined calling my manager back, saying I had reconsidered, restoring the narrative. Instead, I said something that felt both terrifying and honest. "I am sure." The conversation moved on, but I could hear the subtle shift in her tone. Less admiration, more confusion. When I hung up, I felt exposed. This was the cost. Not applause. Not approval. Not clear validation. Just space. That night, I sat with the discomfort instead of trying to solve it. I realized how deeply I had tied my identity to being admired, being needed, being the steady one people pointed to with pride. If I stripped all that away, what remained? I started journaling, something I had never done before. I wrote without editing, without trying to sound impressive. I wrote about how often I had chosen safety over honesty, how many times I had swallowed opinions to keep the peace. The pages filled with questions more than answers. What do I enjoy when no one is watching? What kind of life feels steady, not impressive? Who am I when I am not performing? For the first time, I allowed myself to not know. It was uncomfortable. There was no roadmap, no external feedback. But in that uncertainty, I felt something unfamiliar. Ownership. The choices ahead were not about maximizing praise anymore. They were about alignment. And even though I still did not fully recognize the man I was becoming, I knew one thing clearly. He would not be built on applause. The real turning point did not look impressive from the outside. There was no dramatic resignation, no grand speech, no applause in reverse. It happened on an ordinary afternoon when I received an email about a new cross-country expansion project. It was the kind of assignment I would have fought for a year ago. High visibility, fast track to senior leadership, long hours, constant recognition. My name was on the short list. I stared at the screen for a long time. Old reflexes stirred immediately. This is your chance. Do not waste it. Think about how this will look. Then another voice, quieter but steadier, asked something different. Does this feel right? I closed my eyes and imagined saying yes. I saw the late nights, the travel, the polite praise, the familiar exhaustion, the subtle detachment. Then I imagined saying no. Less impressive, fewer accolades, more evenings at home, more space, more uncertainty. For the first time in my life, I let the imagined applause fade completely. I tried to picture a world where no one reacted at all. No praise, no criticism, just me, living with the outcome. And in that silence, the answer became clear. I declined. Not with drama, not with explanation beyond what was necessary. Just a calm, simple decision. The reply came back within the hour. Brief. Professional. No disappointment. No celebration. Just acceptance. That evening, I walked home slowly. The city looked the same as always, but I felt different moving through it. Lighter. Not because life had become easier, but because I was no longer negotiating every step against invisible expectations. When I reached my apartment, I opened the windows. The air was cool. I pulled out my sketchbook again and sat at the kitchen table. As the pencil moved across the page, I realized something. For years, I had chased freedom through achievement. I thought if I earned enough approval, I would finally feel secure enough to relax. But approval had only tightened the leash. The freedom I had been looking for was quieter than that. It was the freedom to choose without rehearsing how it would be received. The freedom to disappoint someone and survive. The freedom to say, "This is what I think," even if no one clapped. I am still learning who I am without the constant mirror of other people's reactions. Some days, the old instincts resurface. Some days, I still hesitate. But now, when I feel that urge to adjust myself for approval, I pause. And I ask the question that once terrified me. What do I think? Not what will impress. Not what will reassure. Not what will earn a gold star. Just what feels honest. And for the first time in my life, that answer is enough.